What's up guys and gals, it's Cherry for opinion video of today. Actually I'm doing this video just a day before when it's actually out because I've been going way too many ideas through back and forth and kind of losing focus what to say about. But this idea came to my mind when I was actually lifting in my front yard last weekend because I was listening to old albums, new albums by old bands such as Vader, Testament and Oceans, which came just back with a new album, you know, a long hiatus, then came back for live, and then after all a new album. Also a new Paradise Lost album is just out today, 15th of May. That is just like day before this video is actually out. So what I'm trying to say here is that I noticed that so many of these old bands this year are making strong albums. Some of them never were away, like Testament or Vader or Paradise Lost. And also other bands which are still old and kicking, like Enslaved, are doing albums. And I'm starting to wonder, like, when the torches are going to be passed. Like, what goes on with these old bands, because some of them are really strong. For example, I've never been a Testament fan, really. I mean, I had my share of thrash metal and I really love it. I really love when a good thrash metal album just kicks my butt and it keeps me going, very good for workout or, I don't know, jogging or whatever, beer drinking. But still, somehow I have always kind of a past, you know, Testament for so many reasons. I don't even know why, because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the band. But anyway, I was listening to this new album and I was like, God damn, these guys still kick ass. Good production, good songwriting, good vocals, everything is right there to just kind of deliver a thrash metal album like it was 1980s once again. So that could have been like just a one shot here and there. New Vader album, which was I think mentioned to me by one of my review colleagues for another media, was like, hey, have you heard it? And I was like, no. Well, give it a listen, it's already on Spotify. I was like, no, I didn't even see it on like Nuclear Blast promo pool. So I went to put my headphones on and gave it a listen. I was like, god damn shit, man, what the hell is going on? Vader is doing so great an album, like so strong. You know what, like, man, they never basically did a weak album, but it's kind of like peak moments and low moments, kind of like doing this wavy motion. And now Vader is back with a very strong album, and like, okay, what is going on? This band has been here for like more than 30 years, still doing really strong album. Now, new Paradise Lost is obviously a strong one. I'm gonna review it as soon as get it. That is the physical copy. I've had it digital promo for a while, but as you all know, I will focus on physical ones only, so I get to feel and show you the covers and all that stuff. And now that there are bands like Enslaved coming out later on this year, obviously I still haven't heard that one because it's a, I think, fall 2020 release. But I mean, for the past so many albums since Rune album back in the 2007 or 2008, something like that, has been one of my favorite bands for a long time. And since this past more than 10 years, Enslaved has delivered nothing but absolute goodness. I'm like, okay, so lots of old bands are still very, very energetic. Now, obviously, it helps when you're a big band and you have a kind of a better budget to do a proper studio and all that stuff. But it doesn't really explain songwriting, like how so many bands that you already felt like years and years before, like they've gone on decline and gone for good, you know, being sloppy songwriting and all that stuff. Like, how is that even possible? Also, Sepultura, after some 35 years, made a rather nice new album called Quadra earlier this year. So I'm just like starting to wonder, like, what keeps these bands fueled after so many years, so many tours, so many albums, so many lineup changes, and some bands are still able to keep that quality up, or even better, come back from the pit that they essentially dug themselves into, meanwhile, you know, being kind of after prime years or whatever. And this brings me to the question which I probably asked myself and you guys a lot of times before in other videos, is that when the torches are going to be passed. I mean, when these old guys are like, okay, let's just scrap it. We are too old for this stuff. We're not able to do the quality which was possible in the 1980s or 1990s or hell, in the early of this millennium. But it seems like so many bands are stubborn as hell to kind of stop doing what they are doing. And luckily so, because after all, if these bands can pull that kind of stunts after 30 or 40 years in the making, like, why should they stop? Now, of course, there are bands that have kind of lost their grasp. Yes, I'm talking about big bands such as Metallica and Iron Maiden. Obviously, Iron Maiden is one of those bands that is going to just kind of divide people into different categories. They're people who just like love whatever they do. Everything they touch is more or less golden. Same, I guess, could be said about Judas Priest, which, by the way, also did a great album a couple of years ago with the Firepower album. And that was something I didn't expect, not because I am not a big Judas Priest fan, but because the last couple of albums, which I remember hearing before Firepower, were like, yeah, quite all right, but I wouldn't buy them. When suddenly a really strong heavy metal album comes out, I'm like, what the hell just happened? But like bands like Metallica and Iron Maiden, as much as I love old Metallica, as much as I can really dig into old Iron Maiden, I don't think those bands have been very essential last few years. I mean, they do good tours, they do good gigs and all that stuff, obviously. But good albums, not so much. So when bands that are big but not as big as Metallica and Iron Maiden still are able to kick ass, including bands such as Cannibal Corpse, I'm always like, wow, that must be really sweet an experience when after 30 years in the making, you can still be very vital, you can still do great shows, and kind of deliver this young passion and energy that you had already some 20 years ago. And people start to get old, you know, they are not as quick as they used to be, they're not so much full of passion maybe, they have their own chores to do and all that stuff. So how they keep going? And when exactly they do find out, like, okay, let's call it a day, this torch is gonna be passed to these other youngsters out there. Now, obviously, big bands are selling, that is, outselling these smaller bands for so many reasons. First of all, they got the name and the brand, so everybody do know them. And also because of this, you know, it's not so easy to just quit your livelihood. After all, it's way more than just about creating songs and, you know, going to the studio and hone it to the level that everybody will love it. Because everybody won't. I mean, just big bands such as Metallica and Iron Maiden, people are gonna get divided. And some bands seem to already kind of gotten into this decline mode. Not in terms of album sales necessary or tours or whatever. But if you take a look at bands such as Five Finger Death Punch, horrible band by the way, I mean, they have kind of outgrown already these older bands. So definitely this kind of a change of generation is more or less coming. It's kind of a destined to be. And it's very understandable. And bands in, for example, black metal, so many bands of them are in decline. I doubt that many people will say that Burzum is nowadays as good as it was in early or mid 90s. I doubt so many people are saying nowadays Satyricon is as good as their, say, first 3 albums or whatever. So obviously bands are in constant change and it's hard to kind of maintain the kind of a quality you once managed to achieve. But when these bands are actually like calling, let's just call it a day and do something else. Let's just create a new band or stop doing music altogether because this is not the quality people are used to. Or is it just about nostalgia, like when people are like, yeah, I don't listen to thrash metal beyond 1980s, it cannot be good. I don't listen to death metal or black metal unless it's from 1990s. These can be very valid opinions, but they rarely are. What they are in essence are many times just sticking to nostalgia instead of just giving these newer bands or newer generation a fair chance. But that all being said, the competition is right there. I mean, if you have bands like Vader delivering really strong death metal album, smelling of trash also, it's not so easy for these new bands to even compete with those veterans. I mean, the younger bands might be more hungry, they might be more full of passion, they might be faster playing the stuff. But what they do lack is the experience. And that's something, my friends, you really can't buy with money. You need all the time in the world that is possible to get that experience. And in essence, that means playing a lot, touring a lot, even reading all kind of feedback about your band. Because essentially, the audience kind of defines whether you're successful or not. So it doesn't matter if a bald head like me saying Five Finger Death Punch is crap, because if it pleases millions and millions of people around the world and they will be buying the merchandise and albums and going to the tours, they will find it's good. I mean, doesn't matter what the genre is, audience always, as a big critical mass, kinda defines what is to be successful and whatnot. However, obviously, with smaller bands, sometimes these really good, really quality albums and all that stuff kind of get missed. And the reason is these bigger names get the more coverage, more visibility and all that stuff. So sometimes the really good stuff is under the dirt. People are unwilling to kind of dig, or maybe they don't even understand that there is this whole different level beyond. Now, all this rambling this doesn't really have a point. I'm merely wondering, like, what time will it be? Which year? How old will I be when these good old bands will just finally call it a day and say, that's it, no more Paradise Lost albums, no more Vader albums, no more Slayer, whatever bands there are out there that have been kicking ass and defining the road for not only extreme metal, but metal in the first place. Like when these big giants will start to fall. Not only in the terms of success, because it's another thing versus quality, but when the big bands will kind of, as in big mass, start to go in decline. We have plenty of these examples, way more than I could ever have time to do this video of these bands that have started to get in decline, where only the biggest fans will be dragged along because they won't just give up on any kind of manowar stunt or whatever. But eventually all the big bands will just die and vanish, and new names will pop up to conquer the world. Now, I've been already saying that there might be this time that none of these big ass bands will ever be again. I mean, once these big names such as Iron Maiden and Metallica are gone, will there be new names to take up their place? Will there be another Motorhead? Will there be another Judas Priest? Maybe, but it's very likely that things won't be the same. And stuff like coronavirus and all that stuff affecting live shows and all that stuff, even album sales and merchandise sales, will also affect all this. But even more, I think, will affect the fact that we have more metal bands than ever before our times. So people's attention is more spread along all these bands. And who knows when these new messiah bands, so to speak, will just come up and conquer the world. So, meanwhile, waiting for that time, it's obviously a good time to also check out these new bands. So make sure that you are not just one of those mainstream flies who are all about big bands, but keep digging the smaller bands. Go read forums, read or listen to or watch videos made of bands you have never ever heard before, because those might be the bands that will be pleasing you for a long time, even if you don't know their names just yet. With all these being said, have a wonderful weekend and check out some new metal wherever you want to find that information. This is just one channel of the many, so dig, and once again, dig into some good music. Take care, my friends, and see you later with more videos coming your way.